Good evening to all those present here in São Paulo and also those who are accompanying us on the channel of Irdin Publishing. You are welcome to this type of content. We are going through a very delicate moment on the planet, and a great part of the information that we receive daily do not coincide or collaborate for us to be able to find again a true meaning for our existence. So with this impulse, José Trigueirinho founded a work in 1987 known as Community of Figueira. I am a co-founder of this community, and today I continue this work with transmitting some instruction. We have some lectures recorded about dialogue, cooperation, present moment, making decisions, among others, which are very basic impulses when, if we want to find again a trail that will lead us to the center to the core of our consciousness, and eventually we may have more clarity about our path and trajectory there. So welcome those who are accompanying us online also. We have some hundreds of people who accompany these lectures, so you are all welcome. The theme chosen for today is when the wind blows, how will the sails be like? So we always look for a symbolic impulse of symbolic life, which is a way for us to come out from thinking mind and more quickly submerge or be attracted to the intuitive plane, which is like that moment when the airplane goes through the region of turbulence of the clouds and begins to fly in a different environment. So our consciousnesses also need to have this type of symbolic impulse, not to live only its rational and analytical maturing, but also the intuitive and more internal one. What could it mean? How would the sails be like when the winds blow? We are going to see here. And at the end, we are going to have a moment for questions. Also, we will prioritize people who are outside or those who are present here, those who are on the chat, and then after those who already accompany the work will be able to ask their questions. Well, the wind could be the symbol of something that we cannot control. So we are generally educated to control everything, right? Absolutely everything. Just right after a baby begins to manifest a coordination, the first impulses are mine, to take power over something, to get, to protect. And in our type of human process, not for a bad intention, we are not used to a different type of content in our education. That is to say, this wind, which is the symbol of that which we cannot control, this impulse, this life, that we are all contained within it, being conscious or not, or more or less conscious, as we'll see here. And here we have an important reflection, because that which we cannot control generally causes us a lack of interest. So when we interact with something and we can control that in some way, it begins to enter the games of interest, of power. And as we have interest on something, this mobilizes us. But wind, life as a whole, is uncontrollable. So this reflection goes towards this direction. And this impulse, this wind, at a certain measure, it does not depend on our will. As we will see here, what is related to us, we should see it as a vessel. So we have the boat itself, the structure of the boat. We have the rows, the rudder. We have the sails, the ropes. But the wind is something of life, something that transcends the vessel. And as we cannot control this impulse that will make us sail, that is, go through our human experience, this oftentimes needs a deepening so that we can take better advantage of this experience that is so rich, so precious, not something precious as we can imagine or understand it. I always try to bring the consciousness of all to the present moment. Are we giving value to this precise moment of our lives, not in 1 hour, 40 minutes, or tomorrow? Because I could not be alive in 40 minutes, better saying, I could not be on this plane in 40 minutes. So am I giving the greatest value to everything that this life is bringing to me at this precise moment? So the ropes, the rudder, the sails, the shell of the boat, all of this is part of the vessel, but we know that life blows when and in the way it wants. It goes much beyond this. And as this cannot be controlled, it generally generates a lack of interest, and we want to force our vessel to sail towards a certain direction when the wind is blowing in a different direction. And there could be an important reflection that could bring a lot of peace to us eventually, because we stop struggling with this wind, this life. The contrary, we begin to interact, to anticipate and intuit many situations, as we will see today. So up to here, how the consciousness is the consciousness of each one of us putting itself under the perspective of this symbol. Because we can only recognize that which we call life when our boat begins to interact with this impulse of life. That is, there is a great tendency also, especially in the world of today, that we are always depending on someone or on something from outside to lead, to conduct our boat, our vessel. So in reality, this wind, this life, this impulse that is completely out of control, we cannot get the wind, we cannot control it, we can channel it inside of our vessel. It's a symbolic language, we should understand this, and we can interact this with everything and give direction to our sailing, to our human experience, and have a more constructive experience. Now, do we realize that this driving force in this small vessel, which is our human experience, is mysterious? This wind, this force is mysterious. And when we realize this is a mystery, are we interested in seeking it, in discovering it, in the proportion that we can interact, or do we become disinterested and we are just blowing our sail, that is impelling arbitrary experience without a higher inspiration? I always say that your body language is my thermometer of my content. At the beginning, it's just this gaze that, am I understanding it? Can I follow it? This is the intention, really. For us to come from up there, to go up there, from the analytic mind, to be there between thought and reflection, and receive a sort of impulse that will put our consciousnesses somewhere else, which is the place of symbolic life. So going back to the symbol, each one of us knows perfectly well how that as this impulse is not controllable, our vessel could be going very well, we are sailing very well, we feel that things are flowing, that we are at the same direction that the wind is going. And there are moments when we experience the sensation of calm, as if anything were happening. But our vessel itself, as that which corresponds to us, as a conscious physical being, a mental and emotional being, is there in a state of continuous vigilance or vigil to receive this wind? Or does it happen in its interaction with the wind, and when the wind comes, the sail is closed, the ropes are loose, or I'm too tense, there's no wind, I'm holding the rope there, I want to go, but there's no wind. Do you realize the analogy with the day today? So the symbol, it was, let us say, chosen, so that through this symbolic language we could see how our relationship with life itself is. So when the wind blows, I am restless, my arms are crossed, my hands are not in the rudder, I forgot the direction I have to navigate. So when it's the moment to go to perceive that the wind is blowing in a more profound direction, do I interiorize seeking this more profound language, or am I agitated because I don't perceive this wind? So all of this is the symbol. And what does the rope mean in the symbol? Although we don't have sailors here or someone who knows the mechanism of a boat, this rope has to do with that we stretch the sails to make the sails ready to receive the wind and then generate the movement, but also change the direction of the boat. And this is very interesting. And here, the rope is the symbol of our personal will, and this will can only take place if we assume the rope. Is the rope of our lives, or the rope of that which we are really aspiring for, and we have seen as our way is stretched? Have we assumed it? Or are we complaining that someone is not stretching the rope, and this is why that our boat does not move? Do you realize the analogy? Because we have to regain this possibility that up to a certain point we may get this rope, stretch the rope, and start to learn how to sail. This is why we are here. It's natural to look to the side and see another vessel here, another vessel more distant, one faster, one more behind. But the point is, the rope is the symbol of this assuming our collaboration with our own experience. It is that movement in us that needs to find the correct tension, because if we have the rope, we have assumed on some degree, but if there is no correct tension, the sail is loose, so the wind passes and does not impel our lives ahead. Everything is symbolic here, you see. I know that it's an effort because our minds tends to apprehend something in our intuitive world goes, and our minds trying to choose some concept. So try to enter into the symbol. So if the rope is at the correct tension, it needs to be at the correct tension, so that when the wind blows, the vessel is in the correct tension to sail. So there is a very interesting matter which will be very liberating, that the wind is not fixed. That is, our interaction with this wind, with life, everything that impels us, has to be with our presence, with a capacity, an enormous capacity of flexibility and adaptation, so that there we may move the rudder, the rope, observe the wind, and our vessel will move with the impulse of life. So the correct tension between our will, our responsibility for our own process. Ask yourselves, how many times today has each one of us been tempted to give the responsibility to someone else, to something, because the governor, the steward, oh no, the driver, oh my cousin. So it's a collective thought form, as if we let the rope go constantly. And hasn't it come the moment for humanity, we who are eventually seeking a more authentic experience, to finally assume this rope and learn how to sail? And again, it's inevitable, and it's forcing the interaction with other vessels, with storms, with moments of calm. And you see, all of this happens under that which we call human condition, which are the currents. So do you see that how rich this analogy is? How do we sail in the air? Our life is under a condition that is the human condition, which is the ocean, the currents, the subconscious. So besides the wind, this blow that we cannot control, we are also landed into human condition, which for most of us is unknown, mysterious, and not, why not to say, something that betrays us. So the rope stretched, the high sail, and a current comes and makes the boat turn. So in this whole interaction, in this chemistry of the wind that blows, we must also learn to identify the theme of the currents. So this symbol is really very rich. So on the day by day, we have a tendency, this is not a criticism or a judgment, we have the tendency of creating the ideal scenario for our sail to sail, for our vessel to sail. So we interpret it that when there is just a little bit of wind, I see that there is no ideal condition for me to go through my experience to sail. Those who can accompany this reflection knows that sometimes with little wind, but a good way of dealing with your own will, your sense of responsibility of using the rope and giving the right direction to the rudder, oftentimes the velocity of my experience, better saying, the wealth of my own experience, is broader than when the wind is very intense. The current goes to one side, when I stretch the rope, the sail goes to the other side, and I feel that I'm out of control. So this reflection is for us to be able to reflect how our sail is before life, how our will is of assuming, of getting the rope. Assuming is not having control. They are two different verbs. The verb assume has a group of meanings, and the verb control has a group of meanings. And in this symbol is also implicit a suggestion that we should learn to interact with different rhythms, because our lives is like this learning experience of impulses, of stimuli, of information and all of this, but how is our rhythm, our interaction with this wind, with this life? When this wind apparently withdraws, do I accompany this withdrawal and seek this stimulus more deeply, or in an immature way I believe that the wind does not exist? It's an important reflection, because we are in a human movement today in the civilization of continuously consume or adhere very superficially to everything, and not perceive that at some moment this rhythm, this pulsation of life is attracting us to somewhere else, also to a place of being waiting, to learn how to wait for the moment that our vessel will have a different impulse and will be able to go through over what? This current that is the human condition. So you see how important it is for us to perceive so many elements that this symbol includes and which is related to our human experience. And at this moment of apparent calm, we became restless. We want to stretch the boat, we want the boat to move. Be calm. It's moment to observe. The wind is to the north, to the northeast. There is something in all of us that is profoundly connected to this wind, which is life itself, because in this analogy, in the symbol of the boat, we are part of this process as a whole, the human condition, the boat, which is our incarnation under the human condition, or conditioned by this human condition, this vessel subjects or totally dependent on a higher life. And why not? At some moment we should get the paddle and get the row and make some effort. Get the paddle and row and make some effort. So I'm going to reinforce, because this sort of stimulus for us to follow this wind when it withdraws apparently to a more profound level and it's not so evident before our vessel. It's important because if we don't realize that they are just two different rhythms and we have to discover their connection, at a certain point, through an error of calculation or interpretation, we could enter an interpretation of depression, of sadness. Where is the impulse that I felt yesterday? Where is the impulse of that time of my life? Where is the impulse when I had that experience? Because this boat needs, that is our human life, our human experience, needs to experience all the types of conditions, cold currents, which are colder, hot currents, coinciding currents, winds that are in favor, and everything could be our interpretation. The wind that is in favor or against could be just our interpretation, because as I learn to use the situations of life to be to coincide with my aspiration of life, I could make a movement with the sails, with the boat, and the wind that's going against could take me ahead. Those who deal with boats will understand this. So you see how important this analogy is to lead us more directly to this sort of reflection. And at this moment, when apparently there is the calm, it's precisely as if the wind invited life, as if life invited to a calmer moment of deeper reflection. However, the type of impulse that we experience today, it seems like we don't have a moment of calm when life provides us this technology. There's always an impulse, a notification that comes to bring us out from this possibility of intuitively perceive how this wind is, how these cycles are, how my interaction with this impulse is, for me to be able to learn, to evolve. Well, so going back to this beginning point of the vessel, how is our vessel? How is our will of really? How are our ropes? Do we have the intention of assuming it, of getting our rope, giving some direction to it? And then we have many excuses. It's useless because there are so many boats shipwrecking around me, so many lives shipwrecking around me. I no longer have strength. But have we been created to give up? Or have we been created to hold this rope, look at this boat, and make an effort? And it's not important if there are 100, 200, 1,000, or there are just one boat sailing alone. The question is, if I want to assume to optimize my own experience, if others don't want to assume their own rope, their experience, although I want and can at a certain degree help them or warn them, I have to give an example first. I should not have as a reference something that someone else is doing to do what I am supposed to do. And I don't know if it's, unfortunately, this is not a word that I don't like to use. There is a collective tendency of giving up on the vessel, trusting that someone or something is going to conduct this vessel, and it's impossible. It won't be like this. We'll be taken if we let this go, if we let go that which corresponds to us, which is the will, the rope, this tension and this openness to learn how to interact with the wind. We are going to be led by human condition, by the oscillation of human condition, which all of us know where it leads us to. And this question, how will the sails be when the wind blows, is also related to eventually how many opportunities go through us every day. Let us have the day of today as our reference of an exercise, because if we are very careful, and why not say demanding with ourselves, how many opportunities have gone through, how many winds or expressions of the wind of life have passed before us, and through our interpretation we didn't want to stretch the rope because we didn't realize that this was part of the impulse for our sailing, for our experience of growth. So here I bring another impulse. Do we have a conviction that everything that happens to us corresponds to us? Everything, absolutely everything that crosses our lives is bringing either the impulse, the learning experience, or it's mirroring something that I don't want to see from inside out. So it happens outside of me, for me to see there concretized, something concretized that from inside out I am denying for some reason. So one day, eventually, there is no criticism here, judgment. This is just an impulse. Let us be careful with the proportion of what I want to bring. So eventually, we have many opportunities a day of using breezes, small impulses to go, and the more I tame myself in this proportion, between the rope, the sail, the hands, and the rudder. My goal, when I give a direction to the boat, to a priority, a goal, when I define this, every wind that blows gives me more condition to stretch the rope, and this will be a driving force towards the direction that I have defined, whichever it is. Everything that, so let us observe the day of today. Everything that happened today before me, did I take it as a part of this great event of life, even if it were a breeze, apparently insignificant, someone I met, someone I talked to, the gesture of someone with me? Wasn't it a wind that I wasted? So I didn't have a driving force for me to sail. So all of this, life as we call, untouchable, uncontrollable, it only gains meaning when it begins to interact with our experience, which is our boat, our vessel. But do we want to have an active experience? Do we want to learn to optimize all of this that we are finding to the most during each day of our existence? Or do we want to be a boat that is still going, led by human condition? Let us remember the ocean currents. Or do we want to learn, even if our boat turns over, there is water inside, you remove the water, I'm wet, dry yourself. It's not through this way. Well, I will correct the direction, the course. But we want to give this direction to define a goal, to optimize our human experience. Or as most people, we will be under the direction of the impulses that are social networks that most of the time are totally out of my experience. That is the relationship of my vessel with life. Why do I have to follow what the other vessel is doing beside me? Who said I have to? Who has told me that? Now we could only have a certain conviction if we are living this process, if our human experience are flowing within this logic, if we can call it a logic, this chain of reflections, through this chain of reflections, when we put our vessel to work and when we are collaborating with our initiative and responsibility that whatever corresponds to us, we are doing it. And for this, we have to be very authentic and genuine, daring for one side, extremely prudent on the other side. And we will only know when we get the boat and we begin to stretch the sails and we learn. There is no way of living but living. No one will teach us to live. It doesn't exist. There could be impulses, references, instructions, knowledge. But if I don't assume, if I don't get that knowledge, that rope, and stretch it, the process is taking place here. My vessel is still, the wind is blowing, the sails are closed, and I am the human condition going through from one side to the other without knowing where I'm going. So how will the sails be when the wind blows? It's an impulse for us to be eventually more attentive on our day-to-day and have this intention when the day begins. You see the breeze that will blow, that is, whoever I meet or whatever I meet, I should take in my favor in the good sense, the sense of composing this constructive experience towards a goal, a priority that I have defined under the perspective of an ethics, common good, not selfishness, that would be outside of this sort of context. Well, so you see, let us see how our hands, which are part of our experience, are a powerful instrument that eventually we are not optimizing or mobilizing so much, as much as we could. That is this will of mobilizing all this potential, this vigilance, and this promptness of taking everything as a great opportunity of learning, of listening. Let us put ourselves, let us give ourselves this attitude, or this inner attitude of listening. Today, when we were listening, or when we were interacting, we may have interacted today dozens of times. Were we interested in learning something? Or do we believe that we know everything? The other one is speaking, I listen, I agree or not, and I'm not attentive that this could be a breeze that could be taking my boat, my vessel, to sail a little bit more, to learn something, to approach that goal, that objective. Or is it this life going to express itself through what? It's not always an intense wind. It could be a breeze that is before me. So eventually there are countless opportunities that could be going through our eyes during the day by day and through our interpretation, as they don't coincide with our expectative. And as they are not controllable or generated by us, we don't see them as an expression of life itself, of the same wind. It seems obvious, but on the day-to-day, it doesn't flow precisely like this. We have a tendency of selecting, which is very important, discerning, but do we discern learning at the same time? Even when I have to say no to something, it's not the moment to something. This is a breeze, an expression of this life. This is strengthening my experience. So as I mentioned before, our relationship with this rhythm of the wind, to learn how to perceive the calm, the direction of the wind, its relationship with the sun. What is the sun? This inner clarity that we perceive that in a way or another guides us. This has everything to do with the wind, also with life. So we realize that the sun in a certain position or intensity will change our sensibility with that current, with the human condition over which our vessel is sailing. But if we are inattentive and entrusting our boat to something, it is as if we had a boat and we allowed someone who is unknown could stretch the rope whenever he wants, to put the rudder in whichever this direction he wants or doesn't want. And this is collective thought. So does our boat have a stranger and we haven't realized? Can you follow it? Or do we feel, oh, let me invite this sailor to come out, because this boat does not belong to him. And we are so submerged in collective condition and human condition that generally we don't perceive where this rope is, where our will is. How my interaction with this rhythm for me to anticipate this wind and optimize. It's said that the good sailor watches the most in the calm. He begins to watch the suns, the stars, the wind, and he gets his own will and put his own experience towards the direction he has defined or discerned towards his goal or objective. Very well. So this is it. The lectures generally last 40-45 minutes. There are many impulses. This content will be then available on the webpage of YouTube of Irdin Publishing. You can make your reflections. We also have the possibility of asking questions later on through the email freiluciano.palestras@irdin.org.br. So these are topics for us to gradually make our reflections. Are our boat filled with sailors who have nothing to do with my goal, or who are fighting with one another? One put the rudder in one direction, the other one pulls the rope, which is this collective thought that puts us from one side to the other, and we ask, where is my experience going to? Am I delivering my experience to a sailor? It's a symbol, okay? A sailor could be a thought form, or the will of others, or collective will, or relatively there. I'm not going to have control so that my boat may have, I may see the wind, the blow, for it to go to the direction that I define or that I have defined as mine? Or am I sailing with that which is collective and I have no idea where I'm going, where my boat or my vessel is going? I just present or foresees that this is not going to end up well. Here everyone is smiles, so it seems like everyone is confirming that this is how it is, really. So at a certain point, our boat is in a speed, and we don't know how it reached this speed, where it's going it. Who is the one who is holding the rope in my existence? And it's useless to come out from the boat. It's even worse, you have to get a collective condition, or Paquetá River, or Niterói River. So the symbol is, when the wind blows, this is constantly. This is the essence of this lecture. The wind is life. So how are the sails which stretch? How are the ropes that stretch the sail? Sometimes it's time to just release the rope, but I have to get experience by sailing. There is no other way. It won't work if I get someone to sail to me. It's useless to think that someone will govern my boat, will rule my boat, because it won't work out. We have been created to sail together in a human collective experience, in many rings of this human experience, but we have the right and also the duty to have this group of situations to define our sun, our direction, and optimize all of this that life brings to us. Very well. So now we are going to open to questions. If someone who is present here has a question, we have a microphone, please, because those who are watching us through the transmission can also accompany the question. And if there is any question in the chat, you can also read it, so I'm available. So now we are with the boat sailing on the ice. Let us break the ice to then flow. Friar Luciano, good evening. Thank you for your lecture, for the sharing. It's very good. I would like to ask you, we are speaking in terms of symbols, so I would like to ask, so the boat has the symbol of the soul, is it? Or of our ego? It's not very clear to me. In this context, the boat is our human experience in this incarnation. The soul could be what is inside of the experience as a whole, but it cannot be the boat. The boat is the incarnation, is the personification, the concretization of a situation in which I need to learn how to interact, both with the human condition, which is impalpable, is an ocean current that I cannot even see. I need to learn how to learn to discern, and the wind, which is this impulse of life, which gradually creates the experience. I understand. So in this case, the wind itself has this symbolism of what precisely? Because I was thinking in terms of Chinese medicine, Chinese culture, and the wind represents the mind. And if you expand this concept, you have the mind that is universal. That is, your human mind having the capacity of uniting to the universal mind. So the wind in this case could be this bridge that connects you, your consciousness, with this higher consciousness, isn't it? You see, the group of impulses here in this context, the wind is life, which we cannot control, we cannot restrict, we cannot even foresee or measure. Then each one of us could take an impulse within this macro impulse of the lecture and take for themselves a line of deepening, the most important for each one, and this is the objective of this lecture, for it to be putting outside of my boat the sailor who has nothing to do with my boat, because nowadays we are very much subjected. I could say that it's even dangerous that we feel deeply frustrated, depressed, and at a certain point we lose this identity, this total identity with our experience, with our vessel, with our sailing. So each one gets from this that which they can connect with other understandings. The most important is constructive, evolutionary, and which can bring our consciousness to a place of integrity, an environment of peace. Moreover, it's not about restricting into concepts. Any other question in the room or in the chat? Yes. Good evening, Friar. Thank you for this rich content. I would like to ask you, if it exists, what is the relationship between the wind, the correct tension of the rope, our will, and free will? A very good question. Our human experience foresees a combination among something that we know that we are looking for, which we don't know what it is, we know what it doesn't need. This is very interesting. I say this to people very much. If you don't know what it is, it doesn't matter, but you should know what it's not. And if we put aside that which we know that it is not, we are getting closer to that which it is, even if we are not aware. So the rope, the sail, all of this, the tension, is a combination of this transcending power, a super consciousness, and our own initiative. It's winding, the sun is there, the star is there. I feel, I have the intuition. Why? Because we are losing this capacity of discerning. Because the free will is not negative. We need to decide. We have to have this freedom to really adhere, decide, and with free will, make a decision. The point is, on the other side, we should have humility and flexibility. Oh, the boat is turning. It's not good. And all of us, in our own consciousness, that which we call intuition or inner world, which touches our shoulder. It's not through this direction. The point is that influenced by some sailor who came to the boat and I didn't see, or who is stretching a rope that I didn't know that it existed, or cloned a rope that is not mine and I don't know what it is. It's a symbol, right? It's pulling my experience to a direction. So at least once a day we perfectly know when things are not well. The thing is that we don't give attention to this, or we think that it's not important, it won't have so much influence, and then things enter, the door opens, and when you see one day you are sailing towards a direction that were not yours. I don't know if it helps. I always say, my answers don't have a period. They are always they always continue. Things continue. If you say, I understand, it's going to be frustration from me. Any other question here or in the chat? So, someone is asking a question. Friar, when we don't have control of the experiences that come to us, the mind brings discomfort for living the experiences. A part as accepted by the mind exists.
Veja, é pouco pegando o gancho da pergunta que ela fez.
Connecting with the question that she asked. The mind exists in many levels, and it exists to be part of the process, to be a data bank of a previous experience, a reference of a previous experience, and there it monitors a certain type of movement to help in my discernment. There is the analytic, rational, intuitive process. This question, there is a trace, there is an attachment of our experience with something that has not been concluded, so I'm in the middle of an experience. It's not through here to the northeast, it's to the northeast. Something in me resists to adaptability, or this is incomplete. So there is no fixed answer. And this is why also we human beings don't want to launch ourselves into this life within some principles, obviously, and have our own experience. And we end up entrusting to a handbook, to something that someone will tell us. So there's a fixed answer. We have to discern, intuit, and perceive. If this fixation of the mind comes with a feeling of attachment, the answer is clear. The wind is blowing in a different direction and you want to insist in this because you are attached. And sometimes the experience is not concluded and your anxiety is making you change the direction and the boat could turn equally. So to each situation, one question. So second question. How to know if a decision made was impelled by the wind or if it was an attempt of control? You see, there is something between the lines which is, one thing is our controlling, our sailing. The other thing is our assuming the responsibility of that which corresponds to us in the sailing, which is to get the ropes, get the rudder, and begin this interaction. So, there will always be a part that corresponds to us, which is not controlling. It is to optimize. It could be that our boat, our human experience is just a little boat of two very small boat, and I could be in a Bobcat 470, and it's in each an impressive speed, each one in their own way. So how to discern? By discerning. If the boat is turning constantly, if when the blows the sail is folded, when the rope is stretched, there's no wind. So everything indicates that I'm not attuned with this rhythm, and this is the learning experience of life. There's no fixed answer. Any other question? Paula Pérez is asking, by giving things that are so profound that seems to have no name any longer, is there any feeling or sensation in the name of the surrender, or this is not the most important thing? You see, even that which you are calling surrender is always a gradual process. So surrender happens. What is surrender, to put it a little bit within this context? Because the question comes out of the context a little bit. Let us put it as an experience. It's an experience that I need to surrender. What is surrendering? Come out of my scope of control or expectation and give this to the wind. Why not saying like this to bring it to this content? Better saying, I will correct the beginning of my speech. When we feel that surrender has matured under a situation or someone or something, when this returns to our consciousness, it no longer touches us. When it returns in some way, we say, oh, this is so strange, it's no longer part of how it worked before. So this is why in a search for a surrender, an offering, for a broader experience, we always have to be very careful, because this process will always be gradual, and those who do not understand that surrender is a gradual process will see themselves oftentimes to releasing the goat but not releasing the rope. That is, as they say in Brazil, a saying in Brazil, you allow the goat to go for 10 kilometers, but the rope is here. So there will always be one more layer of surrender, of availability, of openness, so that the wind will freely blow. So I don't know the link with the context, but not to be confused. I won't expand into this because it's out of the context. Is there any question in the room? First of all, I would like to say that I have sailed a little bit, so I like the lecture. So the first thing that fascinated me in this of sailing is that when you put the boat on the water, the impression that you on the water, you say that you go in a way that the wind will always win. You cannot react, only react. So perhaps it's not a question, it's just something for you to comment. It came to my mind, this thing of the rhythm. There will be people who sail well in strong winds. They like strong winds, and when there is a weak wind, there could be a person who will go well in the weak wind, and the person who likes strong wind will not manage to do it. And of course, everyone will have to experience everything. But I would like you to comment on this, if we can say, if I like strong winds, I will look for strong winds. I will get what you say through her question. When we see ourselves here in the world and we say, oh, I exist, I'm here, what is this finally? Someone could say, someone has put my boat in human experience in my incarnation. I'm here. Because much beyond the wind, there is a human condition. And there is something. The best sailors
suas barcas.
can stick
Anote isso.
their boats.
Que é o excesso de autoconfiança também.
The excess of
Então, veja,
self-confidence.
não se trata de nós, com livre-arbítrio,
So it's not
definirmos ou confiarmos demais, ou preferirmos
the main.
vento
It's not
forte
about
ou vento
preferring strong
O
or
símbolo
weak
aqui,
wind. The
Quando o
symbol
vento-
is
e aqui não
when
tá-
the
o
wind.
título não é quando o vento forte soprar. O título é quando o vento soprar. Pode ser uma
It's
brisa.
not when the strong wind
otimizar a
blows.
experiência.
It
Esse
could
é o
be a
ponto.
breeze. I'm going to optimize
que
my
aqui
experience.
nesse
This is the
momento,
point. How
vocês forem
here
embora
at this
daqui,
moment,
sem levar
when you
nada dentro de
leave,
vocês,
if you don't take
vento
anything
soprou
within
e o nosso barco nem
within
viu.
you, the wind blew and our boat
Então, eu
didn't
vejo
see.
mais por aí,
So I
nesse
see
contexto,
more
tá?
through this
Nessa
perspective, in
linha
this
de
context,
encadeamento de
and in
reflexões.
this line of
Então,
chaining
muitas vezes
or
nós vamos
connecting reflections.
decidindo ou
So
optando,
oftentimes we decide and
criando preferências,
choose and create
à risca
preferences,
de nós perdemos uma grande
running the risk, at the risk of losing a great opportunity of not only sailing with the hobcat, but also with the modest little boat. And if I don't go through this experience in my incarnation, in my experience of sailing, my experience is not complete. Do you understand?
Então não vai muito pela minha preferência.
So it's not through
onde
my
vai melhor ou
preference
pior.
or what goes
na
better
experiência como
or
um todo,
worse. It
e
goes
que eu
through the
sinta a uma certa altura, o que é muito difícil, hein?
what
O ser humano a uma certa altura se sentir pleno e sentindo que a sua encarnação
that I
está valendo a
feel
pena.
full and that the incarnation is being worth it. This type of content is for us to try. Let me get the rope, the rudder, for me to have a happy experience. But when you said the matters as depression and everything, it comes to my mind, the weak wind.
Mas é uma interpretação.
This is an interpretation,
Que mesmo
because
que
even
aparentemente o barco esteja
if
parado,
apparently the boat is still,
e você que já velejou, você sabe que nunca
that you have sailed, you know that the boat is never still.
uma âncora cristalizar em uma posição X.
You could put an
mesmo assim
anchor
você tá
and
ali
crystallize in a
sempre sob a
position, but
condição humana.
you are always upon the
Então,
human condition.
sempre nós podemos estar aprendendo algo,
So we
mesmo
could
quando
always
aparentemente está
be
sem vento.
learning something,
Esse é o
even
ponto.
when
Que a nossa interpretação é que pode estar identificando o vento e pode estar soprando um baita vento.
there could be a big wind. Everything is symbolic.
Porque para mim
And I
aquele
could
vento
not
não
even
é
see because that wind is
tipo de
not
interação
the type of
que eu
interaction
interpretei
that
que
I
o meu barco com a
interpreted
vela
that
X,
my
com a corda Y,
boat with this
ou com o objetivo X,
sail and this
com a
rope
posição
and with
W,
this
me
goal
interessa.
and this position is
Eu
interesting
troco a
for me.
linguagem simbólica pra gente não se perder
I'm
do
bringing
contexto
the symbolic
global da
language for us not to lose the
Então, em
global
geral, é uma
context
interpretação
of the
nossa.
reflection. So generally,
E por
it's
que
our
a
interpretation.
interpretação ela
And
determina
why
muita coisa?
Does
Nós
the
não, vou
interpretation
trazer
determine
o
so many
discernimento.
things? Because we
Se
go
eu
back to that
exercito meu
point.
discernimento,
Because if I
eu
don't
começo a cair na mente
practice my
coletiva sem querer.
discernment,
Então,
I
que
end
teve
up
momento
in
que eu
collective
acredito, não
mind
penso,
without
não.
meaning to.
Fulano
So
é
what he
influenciador.
says,
Imagina, a humanidade chegou a um ponto de influenciador.
you know,
Nós somos
humanity
um mundo interior,
reached a
que
point of
influenciador
having
nós somos?
influencers when we have
Mas eu
inner
quero
worlds.
influenciador.
Why do I
Eu
need
quero ser
someone who
influenciado
makes
pelo vento.
influences? I want to be influenced
É
by
certo?
life,
Eu quero
right?
aprender a navegar. Que
I want to
influenciador.
learn to sail.
Então,
Why
dentro
do I
de
need
nós
an
tem algo que é
influencer?
navegante,
So within
voa, chegou
within
num
us there is something,
maiúsculo.
a sailor
Navegante aqui que sabe
with
perfeitamente
capital
bem
S, a sailor who
onde que a
knows
embarcação tem que ir.
perfectly well where
E
the
nós não
boat
somos
must go,
educados
and we are not
para identificar o
educated
navegante em nós.
to identify
Então
the
começamos a interpretar
sailor
quando
within
não é
us.
assim,
So
então
we
não
begin
está
to
acontecendo.
interpret
Quem falou isso?
when it's not like this,
Quem
it's not
disse
taking
isso?
place. Who said
Como dizia
this?
ali, nós
As they
sabemos
said there,
perfeitamente
we
bem quando a coisa vai
perfectly
mal.
know
Nós
when
sabemos.
things are not working out.
Quem
We
que vai
know.
dizer que não sabe quando uma coisa não está
Who
bem?
will say that they don't know when things are not
Mesmo-
well?
E aqui vai uma coisa importante.
Even, and there's
Mesmo quando
something
o
important
externamente
here,
está indo super,
even
lá,
when
que
it's
merda, tá
going
demais,
great
aqui dentro alguma coisa-
externally, inside there is
melhor
something
você
on,
mudar a direção, porque
better
você
change
vai
the
tombar.
direction,
Esse barco
otherwise the boat is
viu
going
isso?
to turn
esse
over.
barco vai tombar. E,
This
por outro
boat is
lado,
going to turn
no
over.
critério geral coletivo,
And on the other
tá meio
side, the
morno, né?
general
Você tá
collective
super aqui dentro,
criteria, it's
tá aí indo e é o seu caminho.
tepid, say
Esse é o ponto.
lukewarm.
É a genuinidade da nossa experiência.
Our experience has
Esse é
to
um
be
impulso
genuine.
de
And this
otimização
is
da nossa
an
experiência.
impulse of
Vamos dar voz para
optimizing our
outros, tá?
experience. Let us give
Mais uma pergunta
the
aqui.
speech to others, okay?
Frei, quando a gente escutava sobre esse paralelismo
Friar, when we are listening about this parallel
teria algum vínculo que
connection
veio
between the
muito
boat,
a
the
passagem
sail,
na Bíblia
it came to me the
de
passage of the
Jesus com os
Bible
apóstolos.
of Jesus
E
with
como
the
cada
apostles,
começou a reagir
and
de
how
uma forma,
each one
estava
began to
aquele
react.
medroso, aquele
There was
não,
one
o
who
Senhor
was
está
afraid,
dormindo.
and the other one said, "Oh, the Lord is sleeping."
Vai ser um pouco em contexto, na outra
See,
a gente
I
volta, tá?
understand. It came out of the context a little bit, but I'm going to bring it
Jesus,
back.
podemos ver como
You
esse
see,
navegante com N
you can
maiúsculo,
see
tá?
Jesus as
Que aqui
this
em nós,
sailor
em
with
algum
capital
grau,
S, which is the
representa
one in us
Jesus,
who
guardadas as
generally
proporções,
represents,
tá?
given to the due
Essas reações
proportions,
todas são dos
represents.
aspectos da nossa
All
personalidade.
these reactions are
Então, tem
aspects of
aspectos
our
em nós que a gente sabe
personality.
como
So there are
agir,
aspects of our
ou
personality
quando tá com vento
that
forte,
when it's
estão
calm, they are
mega
agitated.
agitados,
When the wind is
ou
strong,
estão
they
com
are
medo. Então,
highly
boa pergunta também por
agitated.
isso.
So the question is good
Então,
also for
é
this.
importante sabermos que
So it's
na nossa
important to
embarcação,
know that on
tudo
our
isso, a
boat,
uma certa altura,
all of this
precisa
at a certain
conviver
point
e
needs to
amadurecer.
live together,
O nosso aspecto
coexist,
tem
and
medo quando o
mature.
vento sopra.
Our
Será
aspect
que eu
is
vou conseguir
afraid when
segurar?
the
Não.
wind
Quem
blows.
navega-
Am I going
navegaria
to be
sabe.
able to hold
Segurar
it?
com o vento.
Those who sail
Três
knows.
braços baixos, movimento,
Who,
se acalma. Se chega naquela correta tensão, né?
if you
Assim,
get the
quando
correct
você tem
tension,
equilíbrio entre o vento, o
when you
solo,
have the
a
balance
oscilação do
between
mar, as correntes,
wind,
você
sun,
sente uma
oscillation of the
convicção de que é
ocean,
por aqui,
then you feel the
essa é a
conviction
tensão
is this is
positiva,
direction, this
esse
is
é
the
o ponto.
positive tension, this is the
Então,
point.
esses aspectos todos
So
vão
all
emergir,
these
e eles
aspects
são
will
parte da
emerge,
nossa tripulação.
and they are part of
São os aspectos humanos nossos que estão aí nessa embarcação, na nossa
those
experiência
who are
humana.
in the boat, on
Inevitavelmente,
the
temos
boat.
também aprender a educá-los,
Aspects that we need to educate, to
observá-los,
observe them.
especialmente. E o ponto é
And the point is
identificar.
to identify if this
Se alguém
fear
gritou lá do
comes,
barco,
if someone
"Cuidado
is
com o vento,
screaming
cuidado,
from
camarada,
the other
cuidado,
boat,
não sei o quê,
be
olha o sol."
afraid with the wind,
Pois é, uma coisa
of
que na minha
the
experiência eu
wind,
percebi,
the
bom, aqui tem que ter um
sun.
pouco mais de prudência,
So
tem que,
I
né, mudar um
perceive I
pouquinho
have to
o
be
ângulo do
careful
vento e
here. I
tal,
take
acorda.
change the angle of
Uma
the
analogia, tá? A
wind.
influência dos aspectos externos,
It's an
do mais,
analogy,
da
the
consciência
influence of
coletiva,
external
do que vem diante de mim.
aspects and what comes
Por
from
isso, o
inside
estímulo
of
dessa
me.
vigilância
This is
ao
why the
longo do
stimulus
dia,
of this
para vivermos a
vigilance
nossa
throughout the day
experiência.
for us to live
Quando eu
our
cabeça
own
de noite para
experience.
dormir, eu vivia a minha
And when
experiência,
I
não
go to
importa o que
bed
minha
at
mente está
night, I
falando.
lived my
Foi isso,
experience.
foi
It
aquilo,
doesn't
foi
matter if
isso,
my mind
outro.
is saying the others said if this
I'm
and
sorry.
that. I'm
Um
sorry.
é outro.
The others
É outro
are
barco, é
others are
outra, é
others.
outra coisa.
Another boat, something
Claro,
else.
num princípio de
Of
humildade,
course, in the principle of humility
boa prática, não,
and good
eu
practice,
necessito
I
discernir
need
se
to
não é um alerta
discern
que o outro está
if
trazendo
it's not a
também.
warning that
Tá?
others are bringing
Isso faz
also.
parte.
This is also
Mas se eu
part
estou
of
inteiro na
this.
minha experiência, aquilo vem como algo positivo.
But if I'm
Jamais eu vou perder
entire
minha
in my
noite porque um
experience,
outro falou
this
uma coisa,
comes
isso não.
as something
É para quem
positive.
está
I
com
will never
marinheiro
lose
no
my
barco,
sleep if
sabe,
someone
marinheiro
said
do outro barco.
something.
Não?
It's for those who have a sailor from
Para
another
encerrar, mais
boat
uma
in my
pergunta,
boat.
senão
So
encerramos.
just one more
Pois
question,
não.
and then we'll close.
Tem alguma notícia? Então, santo e mais uma, tá?
Two questions then.
Gratidão pela partilha.
Thank you, Friar,
E
for
no decorrer
the
da sua fala,
sharing.
me
And
remeteu
throughout
muito
your
àquela
speech,
experiência que Trigueirinho
I've
narra
I
nos
remembered
livros
very
da sua
much
vida,
the experience that
daquele
Trigueirinho
processo,
speaks
essa
about in
carruagem
the book of The
sobre os
Energies of the Race in Our
cavalos
Lives,
e o
when he
condutor.
speaks about the
E também
courage,
a experiência
the
de
conductor,
Hércules,
and also the experience
momentos
of
que ele tá
Hercules,
buscando se
when
identificar,
he's trying to identify himself, all of this.
assim, veio para mim assim
So
uma
it came to
ligação
me
com
a
isso.
connection with
E
this.
aí eu queria ouvi-lo, se
So
isso
I would
talvez,
like to
sim,
know if this is related,
esclarecer
if you
algo
could
mais.
clarify something else.
Veja, na vida simbólica, nós
You see, in
podemos
symbolic life,
usar
we can
diferentes
use
símbolos,
different
diferentes
symbols and
imagens
different
para
images
compor
to
tipo de impulso.
compose a sort of an impulse.
Se fôssemos criar, não? Quando
If we are going to
o caminho for
create
íngreme,
when
a
the
carruagem estará próxima, você pode criar vários
way
conteúdos,
is steep,
mas como não é o contexto, eu não vejo muito
we are going to create,
que poderia abrir uma frente que
there
não tem
is
tempo de aprofundar.
no, I'm not going to extend into this because I won't be able to
Do que ter
So I would like to avoid a superficial answer. So in another moment, we will deepen into this.
Isso.
Pilar pergunta. Diante de
Pilar
um
is
cenário
asking
onde a
Friar,
navegação
before a
deixasse de
scenario in which the boat stops looking for a safe harbor and is so immersed in this sailing, how to interpret the element earth?
Olha,
You see,
porto seguro e
safe
navegação
harbor
a full
and
são a mesma coisa.
full
No
sailing
momento
is the same
nós
thing.
sentimos, não, que ali
There's a
embarcação
moment when we
necessita
feel that the boat, that the
fazer uma
vessel
síntese,
needs to make a
e o porto
synthesis,
seguro aqui eu vejo como uma
and
como
safe
uma
harbor is a moment as a
A
synthesis
nossa
as I
experiência,
see.
ela
But
é
our
dinâmica.
experience is dynamic.
No hinduísmo se fala muito isso.
And
Nós
in
não temos como
Hinduism,
parar, porque a nossa experiência
we
da
say this
encarnação
very
é uma
much. We
experiência
cannot
dinâmica.
stop because the experience of the
Então,
incarnation is dynamic.
o porto seguro
So,
navegar a
safe
full,
harbor
com plena
and
convicção,
fully
são a mesma
navigating
coisa.
with full conviction are the same thing.
Na otimização
One in
máxima
optimization, the maximum
de todos os elementos que nós
optimization
conversamos hoje aqui.
of all these
E
elements we have
outra,
talked
aqui no momento
about
de síntese,
here
onde eu estou no
today,
porto
and
seguro,
another
onde
one,
estou ali
the element of synthesis
assimilando
when I
tudo,
am in the safe
discernindo
harbor,
sim, que não,
when
para uma
I'm
próxima
discerning
momento
this
de
yes,
navegação.
the other thing not,
Então,
to
aí,
a next
perdido no meio da
moment of
pergunta,
navigation.
pode
So
ter uma
lost in the
busca
moment of the
de
question, there could be a search for
simbolicamente, não, eu
retiring
quero um porto
symbolically.
seguro,
I want a
uma
safe
cadeira de
harbor
balanço,
or
aí
a
me parece
chair that
pouco
I
uma
will
espécie de morte. Não?
be hanging.
Então, porto
So it
seguro enquanto
sounds like a sort of a
ponto de
death. So a
síntese,
safe harbor
ponto
as
de
a point
recobrar
of
as forças,
synthesis of
ponto de ver, bom,
recovering
então
for
amanhã
strength.
vamos
I see tomorrow.
recobrar forças
Let us
para
recover strength
retomar a navegação. Muito
to
bem.
resume the
Mas
sailing.
porto seguro enquanto encarnados,
But
enquanto
safe
adultos
harbor
com todo esse
as
estímulo,
being incarnated with
não é
all
muito
this
para o que
stimuli
fomos
is not so much
Tem
for
mais
that
uma?
which we have
Encerro.
created. Is there any other,
Uma
or
última
has
coisa.
it
Tem uma
called?
última, não. Pronto.
The last question then.
A Malu pergunta. Outra pessoa
Malu is
não pode
asking.
navegar o nosso barco. Não
Someone
podemos
else
pular do
cannot
barco mesmo
say
na tempestade.
sail our boat.
Como
We
manter o
cannot
controle
come
da
out from the
embarcação
boat
quando
even
parece
when
realmente
it's in a
impossível
storm.
manter o
How can we
controle?
control take control of the over this vessel when it seems impossible to keep control? You see,
No mundo real,
in real
do
world
velejar,
of
do
sailing
navegar,
and navigating,
existe
we do
um
have
cálculo equivocado.
a wrong
Nós temos
calculation.
sobreestimado o
Either
tamanho
we
da nossa
have
embarcação,
underestimated
ou da
the
nossa capacidade
size
de
of our
voar,
boat or
ou
capacity
da não
of
avaliação
sailing
das
or
condições,
known
tá?
evaluation of
Mas na vida
conditions,
simbólica
but in
da
symbolic
navegação,
life of
jamais
navigation,
esse vento vai derrubar a nossa
this
embarcação.
wind will never
Então, não
overthrow our
confundamos, tá?
vessel.
O
So let
símbolo,
us
porque a
let us
interação
not
é
misunderstand the
movimento
symbol,
de
because the
amadurecer
thing is, in the
nosso
movement of
navegar,
maturing our
nós
sailing,
vamos discernindo
we are going to
quanto
gradually
esticar a
discern
vela,
how much to
se eu tenho que agregar
stretch
mais
the
uma vela,
rope, if I
vento,
have to
o
use one
sol, a
more
estrela,
sail,
aprender
the
a
rudder,
ver
the sun, the
as
star,
correntes,
to
o
learn to
tamanho das
see
ondas,
the
correntes frias,
currents,
correntes quentes,
cold
aprender a interagir
currents,
com a vida
hot
marinha,
currents,
não?
to learn to interact with
Isso é uma coisa.
ocean
Outra palavra,
life.
controle,
This
quando
is one
entra,
thing.
aí eu já perdi
The
a
other
proporção
thing is
e
control when it
seguramente,
comes. I have
ou
lost
tô
the
esticando muito a
proportion.
corda, eu tô
And for sure, I'm
controlando
either
pro alto,
stretching the
ou seja,
rope too
tem
much
alguma coisa que não está bem.
and something is not well
Então, de
there.
novo, para
So
sintetizar a
again,
pergunta e
to
a resposta,
synthesize the
a vida
question and the
que está
answer,
previsto para nós
life, what is foreseen
não
for
vai
us,
soprar mais do
will
que a
not
nossa
blow
embarcação
more
suporta.
than
Agora,
that
tem um
which
ponto
our
importante ligado ao que você perguntou também. Se o
vessel
nosso
can bear.
casamento
There is
eu
something
resolvo
important
com o meu
connected
barquinho
with your question
no meio de um
also.
vento
If
forte,
we, if our
essa
free
própria
will,
vida não vai deixar de soprar,
this
esse
life
vento vai me
itself will
jogar
not
para fora
stop
do barco,
blowing. I will be
mas
taken
mesmo
outside the
assim,
boat,
para que eu
but
possa
anyway,
aprender,
it's for me to
não para que
learn,
eu sofra,
not
para
for
que eu
me
seja
to
punido
suffer,
ou
for me to be
penalizado,
punished
não.
or
Aí entra o tema da interpretação. É uma linguagem
suffer a
forte
penalty.
simbólica,
And this
de
is a
novo,
theme of
mais
interpretation. This
importante,
is a
cada
symbolic
pegue aí
language
algum
again.
elemento,
The most important is
veja
for each one to
no seu
get
dia a
an
dia
element and
como
see
está
on
esse
the
aproveitamento
day to
máximo
day how
de
this
tantas
maximal
brisas ou ventos
taking
que passam
advantage
diante de nós,
advantage of these
estamos levando
breezes
nossa
and
experiência
winds that
humana na
pass through
direção,
us, and if we are
se tudo
taking
isso
our
nos
human
ajuda,
experience in this direction, if all of this helps us to sail towards our goal, and or if we think that if everything that is happening is going against the victimism, the sea is against what I want, the wind doesn't go, no, this place of victim, of a victim, must be avoided. The aspect of that feels the poor person, or that my sail should be higher, or if the rudder were more profound, and then we begin to lucubrate, and it has come to an end. So these learning experience of the aspects are also important. So if you have questions, freiluciano.questions, freiluciano.perguntas @irdin.org.br. I live in Portugal. We also have lectures in Spain, in Angola. The next lectures will be in the United States in May, and you'll be able to accompany them also on Irdin channel. They are always live. I'm always available to answer, if I can answer, within the possibility of my consciousness. To those who are accompanying the transmission, and to those here, good night and a good sailing for you. Thank you.